Yes, you're muted.
Yes,
Hopefully,
yes.
okay. Great. Thank you all for spending some of your lunch hour with me today. Let's see here. I'm going to be talking about our Central Coast Healthy Watersheds report card project. We've been working on this for several years now, but we took about a 18-month hiatus to do some other important work here at the region. So this spring we started back on this project and are going to be taking this to the National Water Quality Monitoring Conference next week to present it. Again, I wanted to thank and mention Dave Paradis, my partner in crime here and the software designer for the work I'm going to show you, which is all available in a web-based format. I always start with this slide because a number of years ago we established our vision for our Central Coast as simply healthy watersheds, which includes three components, three goals: healthy aquatic habitat, proper land management, clean groundwater. And they're all framed in what we call an 80-20 question. 80% of the habitat is healthy, and the remaining 20 is exhibiting positive trends. I'm going to be talking primarily, actually only about the healthy aquatic habitat goal today and our work to get to this answer. What is the status of our watersheds in terms of their health, and what are the trends in the areas that are not healthy? So this is required, well, the way we've approached it is to integrate a number of different data types. We have a very robust monitoring program here in our region, a lot of data, a lot of different data types, and a lot of opportunity to actually show trends. So we wanted to use as much of that as we could and integrate that into a report card style assessment. We wanted to be able to look at those trends both at the analyte level and then at the level of the indices and in spatial areas. Where are areas of the watersheds improving? And then finally, we're integrating our site level data that we collected through our monitoring efforts with model data to get a full assessment of whole watersheds. So we wanted this to be designed in a really user-friendly web environment with the data available from readily available sources. And so at this point, this does draw data from CDIN and use that data, which has been really interesting because it's brought a whole new realm of information into our website that we haven't looked at before. Basically, it rescores as a new batch of data is brought in, so the report card refreshes itself. It uses a consistent approach to scoring that involves setting a threshold for health. And again, the goal here is to measure health. So we're not often we're setting the threshold conservatively for protection as opposed to harm. And then also wanting to be able to drill down, because we have so much data available to us, to a high level of detail and look at the data underlying the report card scores. I want to also mention, for those of you who've seen this before, I need to review the whole project, so you might have to bear with me until we get to the end where we start to talk about some of the newer work we're doing. But I'm going to really quickly whiz through the report card itself so you can see how it works and then talk about in more detail about some of the different pieces. So basically, it comes up with a map of the region that's scored according to health in catchments, bar charts for aquatic life grade for the whole region and human health, and then hydrologic unit scores, again, scored according to health for that area. And so we're going to focus on aquatic life in this case, and I'm going to the Pajaro River watershed. So it comes up with a list of the water bodies that we have data for, and you can see each of them have been scored for overall health. And we're going to pick one here. This is Yagas Creek below Chesborough Reservoir. Up here on the map, we're going to zoom into this part of the watershed. So we click in, and we're going to select the site list comes up for the sites that have data available. And you can see some of them are in pretty poor condition, and it's looking down in this part of that watershed. So we're going to look at the Yagas Creek site at Bloomfield, indicated here. We click on that, and it takes us to our basic report card format, which has several different indices of health scored according to data type. So in this case, for aquatic life, we have data related to conventionals, biostimulation, which looks at things like nutrients and algal mats and dissolved oxygen, and it has some modeled terms in it. Metals and organic chemicals, and you can see we have some problems in several areas in this watershed. We're going to look at conventionals, and you click into a level of detail, and it brings up the analyte list for that index and how each of the individual analytes scored. And you can see here, for example, nitrate scores very poorly with the data ranging as high as 22 milligrams per liter as nitrogen. This is 59 samples, and this is scored for aquatic life, so the threshold here is much lower than the drinking water standard. It's 1. That's what we use here in our region. So the report card gives you a lot of access to the data that actually is underlying these scores. And then below this report card area, can you all see my prompt? I think you can. There's actually a wiki on the web page that allows staff to go in and write notes about that site and any assessment notes that they would choose to write. That then links to, this is our data navigator, which I'm not going to talk about in detail on this talk, but this is a tool that we've been using for many years to view and evaluate our data. It has maps, graphs, great trend analysis, and so forth, summaries of data. So the report card connects to this, which gives you the individual analyte information. So the scoring approach we've adapted from some work Canada has done on their water quality index. And it includes two pieces. One is about magnitude, meaning how high is the number over the threshold, and the other piece is about exceedance. How many times does the data exceed the threshold? So it puts those together into a score for the site at the analyte level. And we're scoring it according to, your elementary school report card paradigm, and using the scoring shown in the figure here. And we do have an A+ score, but we reserve that only for combined index scores. So we wouldn't score a single analyte A+. We would only score like an overall index that includes multiple measures of health. So basically we're looking for our best blue water streams. So we don't score individual measures that way. So this is just a typical analyte map from our data navigator. This happens to be nitrate, my favorite analyte, because it shows clearly some really distinctive patterns. This is where our agricultural areas are, our clean Big Sur coast, et cetera. What we're doing is taking those analyte scores and putting them together into the sub-indices that make up the indexes I showed you earlier. And so this is the content of those various sub-indexes. I'm not going to read all of these, but basically conventionals are nutrients and pH and turbidity and some basic measures like that. Pesticides and organics, metals, and these are both in sediment and water. The biostimulation term, which includes two modeled measures from the numeric nutrient endpoints related to oxygen deficit and algae biomass and toxicity. And then two others that are not completely finished. Our biology component right now just has benthic invertebrates in it. We're working on the algae piece. And the habitat component, which we will include a riparian component and a physical habitat component. So I'm going to skip now to talk about trends, because that's such an important part of our goal question. How do we deal with trends? And so we do have robust time series monitoring in our monitoring program. So we do have a lot of trend data. And so the challenge with this program is not only to look at trends in individual analytes, but to integrate that to the level of the index and to integrate that at the site level to the underlying stream catchments. So it's both spatial and temporal integration. So again, a typical nitrate map from our website. I wanted to point out we have these nice little arrow icons where we're seeing significant trends. So that means at that site, for example, in this case, this is pretty rare to see something change from poor to good. We've had some dramatic change there that's really changed the water quality. And underlying those arrows, we are doing change point analysis, which defines a probable change point in a time series of data. So in this case, this is a great example because we had a treatment plant go online and saw a rather dramatic drop in concentration. Not so much a linear trend, but a point in time where it changed. So basically, these arrows that we're using on the website are dividing the data at the change point and scoring it for the magnitude exceedance quotient for each side of the change point. And then when we accumulate our index scores, we're basically just combining the before period scores to create a before index score, and similarly the after period scores are combined into the after period score. So then we want to take our site level data and integrate that into a spatial assessment of whole watersheds, because it's not good enough to just know the health at the site level. That doesn't really answer the question, what percent of the watershed is healthy and where is that occurring. So what we've done is overlaid this measured data on model data, and the site scores, including the change scores I just mentioned, are attributed to reaches moving upstream from the site. And then we use changes or boundaries in land use to help us define the spatial extent of that scoring. And I'll describe that in more detail. So this is the state's California Healthy Watersheds Assessment. And this is their Stream Health Index, which is, it's all modeled. It's based on, real monitoring information, but it's a modeled assessment of California where they have available data, missing in some of the big desert regions. This is our region here, Region 3. What we did is take that modeled data, and this just shows that data in a different color gradient using our report card coloring paradigm. But what I want to point out is this is truly a gradient of data. It's not grades. Our data is grades because we're using a threshold to define those grades. So we just did 20, 40, 60, 80 color breakdown for this color palette. This is our actual report card scores on top of that. And you can see that for the great part, we have really good concordance in a lot of areas. The really bad areas are really bad, and that's just the way they are, and the same with some of our good, more pristine areas. But there are areas where we are seeing some mismatches and anomalies. So, and that you can see that here. This is the relationship between the two sets of scores with our measured scores on the x-axis. But there's quite a bit of scatter, and that really reflects what the true local conditions are as opposed to the modeled condition. So what we're trying to do is address this by correcting the maps. And so here's an example. This is in the Yagas watershed. I showed you some data related to that earlier, and this was the site we were looking at. So basically, we're letting the site score travel upstream till it hits another site that modifies that score. And it will travel upstream until it either hits another site or a land use boundary, and then it stops. And then what will happen is the underlying model data takes over where we have no measured data. So this is a good example where our measured data would give us actually a better score for this area than the underlying model data, because this is showing it's in fair condition. The model is showing it to be in poor condition. So what we're doing is correcting the model data to more reflect our actual measured scores. And this is, I mentioned that the scores travel upstream until they hit a change in the percent of disturbed area. So if, for example, the upstream area has, 25% agriculture, and then the next catchment up drops to 2% agriculture, that would trigger a change and we would stop the scoring because we don't want to attribute, for example, a bad score way upstream. And this shows you when we looked at the upstream disturbed acreage relative to our index, when we are below about 10% disturbance, that's where our high-quality sites typically are for the most part. And once you get over about 10% disturbance, we don't see many that get into a very good category. And over about 22, we don't see any that get over the fair category. So then the report card, to develop the report card scores for whole areas, we are using the combined measured and modeled data to calculate percent of watershed health to answer our question. And I'm going to confess, this is a mock-up. We literally got the math working half an hour before this presentation, so we'll have it for the conference, but not for this. But this is the percent of the hydrologic unit area showing improvement. So when those sites show change, that change travels upstream too, and we'll attribute the reach above that site in terms of calculating our percent area to these change calculations. So this is, like I said, I mocked this up, but this would, for example, say that approximately some 12% is improving in this case. And so what we're looking for is, as I said, 80% of our watersheds to be in good condition or better, and the rest to be improving. So we want all these red boxes to go away in the long run. That's not the case yet. So I think this is a really versatile tool to help both provide a big picture assessment of, where's it good, where's it bad, where should I put some grant money for watershed improvements, et cetera, as well as the detailed supporting information to understand the underlying causes of the problem. It's on the desktop, readily accessible to help support decision making on a day-to-day basis. We did submit a proposal this round for discretionary funds to hopefully make some of these tools available elsewhere in the state. So we'll see how that goes. And we are also working with the Healthy Watersheds Partnership, which is one of the work groups of the California Water Quality Monitoring Council, on a collaboration with the Nature Conservancy to work on a Healthy Watersheds portal for the state. So we're hoping that either some of our tools or some of the underlying ideas can get included in that project. And I think that's all I have. So I have 10 minutes for questions. I raced through that.
All guests have been unmuted.
So if you have more questions, please ask. This is the time to ask. We have 10 minutes for discussion.
This is Shen Ray from Region 1. I have several questions. I guess from the beginning, what fund was used to build and then to maintain the system? And what are the sources of the ambient water quality data?
The funds in our region did a very kind of an amazing thing about 10 years ago. They put together an endowment for our monitoring program. So it came through settlement money. It was set aside at a nonprofit, and it's still there. We are allowed to spend the interest earnings from that endowment. And we use that to support our sea camp monitoring program, which is part of the SWAMP, family of monitoring programs. We do have extra resources as a result, which we use to support Dave, our software designer, as well as our field staff. So that does give us a little, and Dave's pretty much been with this program from its inception. In terms of the data, as I mentioned, was pulled from CDN. It includes all of our data. We've been monitoring since 1998, pre-swamp. All of our ag programs monitoring data, the irrigated lands program, all of the swamp data, and then our regions really worked hard to get a lot of our partner programs data, encourage them to get their data into CDN. We have some data from some permitted programs, some from volunteer monitoring programs. And so we really just started looking at that whole universe of data in the last several months. And that it is interesting because we have extremely robust data, and when you combine it with data that's thinner, some things work less well with less data. So we've had to make some decisions about, the amount of data we want to include, and we're going to limit site scoring according to that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Uh-huh.
Karen, this is Chris Monnery, 8 Waterboard. I was wondering if it updates automatically or if you have a plan to update it in a cyclical manner.
We're striving for a monthly update cycle. It does take quite a bit of time to run the software because of all statistical calculations. So basically we run it on a weekend, and the plan is to run it about once a month.
Okay.
This is Steve Moore, State Water Board.
Hi, Steve.
How are you doing, Karen? I was just wondering if you wanted to speak about flow data and how that might fit into healthy watershed assessment in the long run.
Yeah, that's on my list too. It's something I would love to incorporate. And we've been working with Robert Holmes with Department of Fish and Wildlife on a flow project to basically get some characterized minimal flow needs for various creeks in our region. With the idea, we collect flow, and we have transect data which shows a lot about the creek profile. The idea of being able to establish some very basic criteria for health, like one being is it dry or not, perhaps. But I think it would be really great to be able to incorporate that. It's tricky, because some of the streams are naturally intermittent, and so Robert is working on that right now, and when that project ends, we'll see if it holds some promise for, displaying in a format like this.
Well, that's good. And in our water rights division, we're working on minimum flows in coordination with California Department of Fish and Wildlife as well. So I'm sure Robert's tied into those discussions.
Yeah.
Yeah. We do have an automated loader for USGS gauges throughout the state that I operate on an ad hoc basis. It's not a regular part of our monthly update, but we do have the automation code complete.
That's Dave Parody speaking.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Hey, Karen, this is Colin Bailey with the Environmental Justice Coalition for Water. I had a question and then just wanted to confirm one thing you had said earlier. The question is, I was really interested in the trending analysis and not being of a scientific background, was curious, especially with respect to nitrate, kind of what is the time period that is taken into account to evaluate a trend?
Yeah.
Because, nitrate can be cyclical depending on the growing season as well as
right.
rainfall and all of those things.
We require, I think, at least we have a sample count minimum and a time minimum. So I think we're evaluating. It has to be at least 2 years of data on either side of the change point, and it has to be at least 20 samples. So,
okay.
But in fact, I have just coincidentally, I wanted to show. This is trend data. This is typical for us. This starts in 2001 and goes through. Well, this isn't updated, but it goes through the present. So we would have a robust monthly set of data at some of our sites. Not all of them. Some of them we do on rotation, but even there we have, monthly data for a year every 5 years. And then what we do is our analysis. This is all on our data navigator. The trends analysis does both. This is without outliers. This is the linear trend, and this is the change point. So it looks at it in a couple of different ways. So when you can see here, it's significant in 2 different ways. But so this is really great data for trends, because when you have that much data, you really get some certainty in your outcomes. Whereas when you're down to the minimum sample count and just a few years on either side of the change point, it really is influenced by climate, drought, those kinds of things. We don't do, for example, irrigation period sampling. We do even monthly interval. And that brings up another issue when you bring in data from multiple sources that we're having to think hard about, because not all data is collected for the same reasons, so it can, change the outcome. So,
yes, thank you for that, Karen. And that actually segues to the thing that I wanted to make sure I heard correctly, and that was that these data do reflect irrigated lands in the Central Coast. I assume
yes.
Much of the robustness of your data is coming from the Central Coast Ag Order. I'm curious if this incorporates the recent data presented by Chris Rose to the Central Coast Board.
Probably, yeah. We have all the ag data. Yes, I would imagine, yes, it does.
Great. Thank you for that.
Yeah. And our data, we actually designed that program to be very similar to the way ours is designed. For example, they do trend monitoring on a monthly basis. They have more toxicity data than we do, but otherwise the programs mesh very well in terms of, just the robustness of the data sets to do this type of work.
Thanks.
We have time for one more question.
There actually was a question on the chat. Someone had asked, are there any reports available for this project? And if there are, can someone get a copy of them? How do they get a copy?
Yeah, there's our methods paper is on the SWAMP website in our the regional reports. So you would go to the Region 3 reports, and it's basically describes the underlying methods that we use to do this work. But it's actually the first phase of the methods paper. It describes a lot of the how to do the report card scoring, how we're evaluating change, and then how we set up our thresholds, which was a big project in itself, because we have scoring for many, many analytes, including a lot of organic chemicals. We brought in John Marshak's Water Quality Goals database, as well as the US EPA benchmarks database. So that was a big component of the work. And the next methods manual will talk about the integration of the sites with the watershed model.
Any more questions for Karen? Okay, if that is the case, thank you very much, Karen, for an excellent presentation. So we'll see you all in the next webinar.
Hello?
Thank you.